This is extraordinary because it is the first time it's ever happened. And Donald Trump could, in fact, face jail time, couldn't he?
Yeah, and welcome back, Ann. I've appeared with Stephen while you were absent, but I did not bring my best stuff. Now I can bring the top shelf analysis that you deserve. This at least demonstrates that we have the same kind of political chaos on our side of the aisle as you guys do, which just shows that our DNA as British cousins and Americans is still linked. I do not think that President Trump suffers any jail time as a result of this. This is a horrific third world type prosecution of the former president when, as Stephen mentioned, you have President Biden, who had documents as vice president and U.S. senator stashed in his garage with his Corvette and at the University of Pennsylvania and other locations around the country. Hillary Clinton destroyed thousands of documents, including bashing phones that were under subpoena. So I think what we're seeing is this horrific third world type prosecution of a political opponent by the Biden administration. And I think most Americans will see through this.
For Trump, though, partly because I'm thinking of his campaign rallies back in 2016, when everything was lock her up, because Hillary Clinton, had used a personal computer to receive some classified emails. I mean, he's sort of backed himself into a corner, hasn't he?
Except that you have the prosecutor in this case saying that there is only one system of justice that applies to everybody. And clearly it didn't apply to Hillary Clinton. They investigated and decided she didn't have the intent when you're bashing phones and destroying documents, and that Joe Biden prosecuted with far worse. So I think that the Trump pitch is going to be that this is a disparate treatment of justice for him that's different than what the others have received. I do think that there are some legal problems with the indictment as well. The Presidential Records Act that applies to the withholding documents after the fact is a civil penalty, not a criminal penalty. And I think the other thing with President Trump is, does anybody really think he had the requisite intent, as under the Espionage Act, to destroy documents? In fact, his lawyers negotiating with the FBI, following the FBI instructions to put in additional security, including an additional padlock on where the documents were being held. There's nothing that revealed that there was any kind of obstruction when your lawyers are cooperating with the FBI, turning over documents to the archives as they were requested. So I think it's a stretch, and it is clearly stacking of additional charges. I think there's 31 counts or so, and many of them are repetitive. Many are the same thing over and over again to make the case look tougher than it is.
Can I just ask that very simplistic question then that I was saying earlier? Why would any president want to take away top secret documents and stash them in their own personal home?
Well, I think you can ask the same thing of Joe Biden. Why was he putting them in a garage with his Corvette when, as a vice president, he had no authority to classify anything or take anything anywhere? I think that the Mar-a-Lago was his home, and you've seen in history in the United States, before you had the Presidential Records Act in the 70s, and before the archives became more focused on them having documents that are part of an administration, presidents took their stuff home. I mean, back in the early days, Washington and Adams and those folks, they took their personal letters and everything home. And we have had at least one case that President Bill Clinton had taken audio tapes from his time. They were treated as personal property. The idea being that he was taking notes. These were recordings for his personal benefit, to do his archives himself and to write a book. And yet in that case, it was deemed, okay, this is personal. With Donald Trump, who did have authority to declassify, now we're seeing a prosecution.
2 points, just because you threw me slightly because you mentioned the Trump having the ability to declassify. I heard that had been denied by the authorities, saying actually he didn't have that power. But my main point was going to be to you, if this is all politically motivated, which is the argument which is being made, then I mean it's a home goal, isn't it, for the Democrats?
It could be. I think in the primary election, this will certainly strengthen and embolden Trump's supporters to say, I'm all in for him. Even some of his opponents in the Republican primary right now are coming out and supporting his position that this is a political witch hunt, that this is outrageous, that it is a demonstration of the fact that we have seen a weaponized Department of Justice, weaponized intelligence service against President Trump. So even they are trying to make sure that they're siding, at least in the Republican primary, with this is wrong. But how this plays in the general election, if President Trump can still get through the primary process, end up as the Republican nominee, I don't know that this plays as well in the general election. Look, you're seeing the same thing in Britain. People get tired of drama. They get tired of the chaos. And there is some Trump fatigue already in effect. And I don't think this helps waylay that.
Nevertheless, at the moment, he is protesting, saying that it is a witch hunt. Gosh, we're hearing it both sides of the Atlantic, aren't we? And he still has a tremendously high following, doesn't he? So perhaps it won't damage him at all.
Yeah, maybe this is a hairstyle persecution. He and Boris do kind of hairstyle, but I think that it will not hurt him as much in the Republican primary, but could really, do damage. And you just need to see some movement from somebody like a Ron DeSantis. Can he get traction, close the gap with Donald Trump? A lot of Trump's support, I think, in the polls right now in the Republican primary are tied to his inevitability. He's going to be the nominee. He can be the next president. If that starts to break down a bit and a Ron DeSantis or Tim Scott or others get closer to him, he may lose that inevitability, and that could take 8-10 points out of his polls.
OK, Steve, really good to see you. I'm glad you've upped your game. I didn't realise you'd let it slip, but I won't hold it against you. Good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.